And now, coming to you from beautiful downtown Wheaton, Illinois.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I call the June 30th meeting of the Complete Count Committee to order. The events arising out of Minnesota earlier this month has prompted many of us at the county to reflect. Earlier this month, Chairman Cronin and I had discussed our continued need to improve relations within the county so that every DuPage resident feels welcomed and included. The diverse makeup of our Complete Count Committee is a great committee for such a dialogue on diversity and inclusion. Just last year, our county had revised our strategic plan for DuPage County government to add a sixth imperative on diversity and inclusion. This led to heightened prioritization of workforce development programs, the start of what will eventually be a disadvantaged business enterprise, or otherwise known as a DBE program, and continued work on hiring and appointing individuals from diverse backgrounds to county-appointed agencies. We also take a stand against all forms of bigotry, racism, and intolerance, and updated our county's mission statement to reflect that. It is the mission of DuPage County government to ensure that DuPage County's communities will always be desirable places to live, work, and raise families where all are welcomed, accepted, and valued by providing innovative, cost-effective services, promoting a high quality of life for all residents, and acting as a leader with its local and regional partners in anticipating issues and developing solutions. Our county-wide officials have also worked on improving diversity and inclusion. DuPage County State's Attorney Bob Berlin and Sheriff Jim Mendrick have made significant investments in training for crisis and de-escalation techniques that result in calmer interactions and peaceful, positive conflict resolution. Just 2 weeks ago, Sheriff Mendrick was highlighted in the Daily Herald for his approach of reaching out to detainees to provide information about their experiences with law enforcement in efforts to better improve how DuPage Sheriff's Office deputies relate with people of diverse backgrounds. Thank you all for joining us today for this important dialogue. I want to also make a special thanks and introduce our three presenters today that took out their time to be here. Today we are joined by Pastor James Miller of DuPage African Methodist Episcopal Church, Ms. Theodosia Gillespie of the Quad County Urban League, and Mr. Michael Childress of the DuPage NAACP. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come to our committee meeting. From this dialogue, I hope we can determine some suggestions for actions our county, our business, and municipal leadership can take to improve race relations and make every DuPage resident feel welcome and included. I ask everyone to keep comments relevant to the topics brought up by our speakers and what we are discussing today. Our focus and goal for this specific meeting is to listen to what our guests have to say and to discuss concrete solutions that we can implement in the community. Our charge is to utilize the experience of our wide and diverse membership. I also want to thank Regina Brent for helping us for just the amount of work that you do in this community and always have done. So thank you so much. To respect everyone's time, presentations and public comment will be timed. 15 minutes for each speaker and 3 minutes for each public comment. We will remind speakers that they have a few minutes left, when they do have a few minutes left, so our meeting can run smoothly and efficiently. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Here.
Jim Healy.
Here. Scott Ostian, Karen Ayala, Joe Breinig.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Regina Brandt, obviously, is here. Danny Brink.
Here.
Thank you, Danny. Brian Caputo, I believe Dr. Caputo could not make it. Is there a representative in his place here?
Yes. Yes, Wendy McCambridge.
Thank you very much. Suli Chang, on behalf, and your name is? Okay. Sheelin, okay. Thank you so much. And Michael Childress is here. Marco Diaz. Tim Elliott. Jennifer Fabian.
Here.
Here. Thank you, Jennifer. Rima Kamran. Ms. Kamran, by Zoom, perhaps? No, I'm not sure. Mary Keating.
Here.
Thank you, Mary. Kathleen Kinney.
Here.
Thank you. Brian Krajewski. Christina DuPage. Lisa Miceli.
Here.
Kara Murphy.
Here.
Thank you, Kara. Sean Noonan.
Here.
Kay Page.
Here.
Thank you. Roberto Ramirez. Mike Roby. David Roth.
Here.
Thank you. Sheila Rutledge.
Here.
Sahira Sadiq.
Here.
Thank you. Lisa Schwach. Ashley Selman.
Here.
Lisa Snipes.
Here.
Patty Smith.
Here.
Teresa Sullivan. Thomas Tawney. Shafali Trivedi. Sarah Troll.
Here.
And Stephanie Webb.
Here.
Thank you all very much.
Agenda item, before I move on to the next agenda item, just want to have a quick note. Whoever would like to, this is a suggestion to our committee members on the Zoom meeting. Whoever would like to participate or make a comment, please push the raise hand button on your computer screen so I could see who's raising their hands and I could call you by your name. All right, I entertain a motion to approve the February 18, 2020 meeting minutes. Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. The February 18, 2020 meeting minutes are approved. Moving on to our next agenda item, the census update by Jonathan Nelson. Take it away, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, well, thanks for coming today. I know we've been in communication with via email the last couple months given COVID. I hope the updates have been good. I hope they've been resourceful. It's hard to imagine that we had our first complete count committee meeting 1 year ago today, or this month, June 9, 2019, and I don't think anybody could have thought that a global health pandemic would have been the biggest barrier to a complete and accurate count of the U.S. Census. But I believe that we've been doing pretty good so far, despite these circumstances. DuPage County has the fourth highest self-response rate in the state. We are at 76.1% as of June 25th. That means 76.1% of households in DuPage County have already responded to the census. So thank you all for your efforts. The state of Illinois, I believe, is hovering a little above 60%, and nationwide that is also pretty good. My apologies. So I have sent all of you the updated 2020 U.S. Census Bureau schedule. The Census Bureau, looking out for the health and welfare of their employees and members of the public, have postponed a lot of the operations due to COVID. In fact, I just wanted to note that the self-response period has also been pushed back from July 31st to October 31st, so this will allow for a lot more time for households to self-respond to the census. So please keep up your efforts in letting residents know to go to my2020census.gov or by calling 844-330-2020 to call the Census Bureau to complete your census, so online or by phone. At this time, I don't have an approximate date that the Census Bureau will be sending out enumerators in Illinois. The Bureau has started to deploy enumerators in some states given the public health guidance, but non-response follow-up has been pushed back to start in mid-August. It was originally going to start in mid-April. So they will be monitoring the situation before sending out enumerators to households in DuPage County. The Bureau will be releasing another postcard to households that have not responded yet during the month of June, so that will be a 7th mailer to households. The Census Bureau has, however, started Update Leave. We've discussed this operation. This is where they go door to door. They don't interact with the public, but they leave another questionnaire. This is going to be done to approximately 43,647 households in Illinois. This is done really in areas where the majority of households do not receive a mail at their physical address. So as of now, we just urge everybody to keep up their census messaging through the self-response period, October 31st. We do, in the county here, have a couple more boxes of our printed materials, both in English and Spanish, our DuPage County palm cards. I know we've been utilizing those with People's Resource Center during their food pantry programs. So please feel free to reach out to me if you need more printed material. I'll keep on including that in our updates.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that would be good.
Oh,
I'm sorry, who is that?
someone is not muted.
Okay, can I ask everybody to mute themselves who are not speaking? Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That actually concludes my census update.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Excellent report. Okay, moving on to our first presenter, Reverend James Miller, Senior Pastor of AME Church. If I could have you step up to the podium, sir. And we're excited to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
There you go.
Thank you, sir. He knows that we work together against. Well, I'll tell you, it was a miracle that we pulled it together. We had the Village of Lisle, the developer, the Forest Preserve, and the church. And we all survived it smiling. I've been the pastor of DuPage for 31 years, and I have served at Wheaton College for 7 years in the history department. And this conversation that we're having today is a start. And I want to acknowledge my esteemed colleagues who spent a lifetime fighting for justice. And when I was asked to come, I had to look at it from a historical academic perspective. I was in my basement today. I think I know my house, so I don't turn the lights on all the time when I go in there. The little light was coming the window, and I knew where I was going. And I was able to navigate and without stubbing one toe, and I got what I wanted to get. And I know I turned around, though, I could see that hallway because the light was coming in. I couldn't see it when I went in from one direction, but the same hallway from another perspective had light. So I'm going to help to lead us very briefly in another perspective. Hopefully we won't hear anything we've heard, because none of that has worked yet anyway. There's good news and bad news. The first thing is that the African being introduced to the New World, enslaved, and I won't say that again, was not an American invention. America did not invent that. That was an experiment in free labor that had taken root in the Caribbean with the sugar plantations. And the New World was so unlimited potential, still is. And they had the tobacco that was going to England, and the cotton that was going. And they said, and I'm not going to get into the origins, it's all historic, and the churches that have been involved have confessed and repented. So that's a lot kids are going to come out. But what I'm saying is that was not an American invention. That was a thriving industry, 178 years from 1619 to 1787. You got Amazon, Google, and U.S. Steel all rolled up into one. You're not stopping that. I don't know what anybody's budget is, but everything's up to 50%. So you can imagine that was going to be difficult. But we missed an opportunity there, because that free labor was not paid, you see. And that created wealth, but also poverty, you see. The unpaid laborer. And that's where a core, that's a core issue. That's your first issue, okay? The second core issue is racism, which is ancient. But this enterprise was sold, you see, because it had worked with problems. Because what are you going to do with how you have to, handle this? And it was first promoted to the American colonists as evangelizing the heathen. But then that came out very quickly, because you couldn't be evangelizing with. So then it came with the 3/5, you see, which is the problem you got with the whole college, electoral college now, because you had all of these where that was more votes. So we reduced the percentage of the person, reduced the votes, and when we can keep it, seeing we're still stuck with systems that were started. I did some research, so that was interesting to me to know that slavery is not an American invention, but it is an inheritance. Okay. So I'm not here about police brutality or the education or the access to health care. But if you're going to get to the core of that, and I think the racism is a lot of education and a lot of the reforms that we have, which will come on. But we're never going to get out of police brutality until you get rid of the poverty. Because the poverty it's a war zone. I've got family, I'm off the south side, and my cousin, I called him, they're talking, what is your opinion about defunding the police? He said that's the craziest thing he ever heard. They go on a leave for 3 days, you'll have them all back, believe. But there is a reallocation of funds that might be looked at, but you still have to deal with poverty. And so I'd like to say that we missed an opportunity with the revolution, because you could have paid a little something, not you, nobody here, but the government could have, and the people, but there was too much, so they couldn't do that. The Civil War, and we're not going into the details of all the things, but now you've got these 2 million people, and please do not make Juneteenth a holiday. Please. We don't need another empty symbol. It's going to cost $800,000. I'll save you time. every descendant of American slavery should be guaranteed a living wage, which now has gone up to 16. The price is going up because people. But number two, we haven't gone into details, but the family. The African was a kidnap victim that lived under a 1660 law, it's history, that the baby belonged to the mother. So now you don't have any family structure because the father can be sold and the mother can be sold and the children can be sold. So you have this whole family structure, and I'll be done in a moment. But let's demythalize two things. Laziness. Who's rushing to a job? You're not getting paid and you're going to get brutalized when you get. That was the first peaceful demonstration, was slow to work. There's nothing lazy about it. You got good workers. And then that absentee father. Well, you couldn't have. But you've got, I would suggest that we have a $16 within the county, 40 hours. With benefits. Now that's not much to anybody, but the people out here that are being brutalized, if they can get $500 a week, and their baby's mama can get $500 a week, $1,000 a week, first thing they told me, we're getting married. They're living with no hope. And I'll tell you all the rest of these things, your insurance, your police, and so on. You won't, it'll all come down. But there's no way we're going to hit this. And I'm done. But I have some more to say at other venues that may be helpful. But I dabbled in real estate a little bit with my wife. And we decided that wasn't something we knew how to do. But one of our properties was being sold during that bubble, that market crash. And I had an agent that was lowering it $2,000, lowering it $3,000. We weren't selling, it was going down. And I got a young guy that came in and said, you never chase the curve, Reverend. He said, you got to take a leap and get ahead of it. And he knocked that thing down $15,000. We sold it. Some people still trying to sell it, never got. You have to take something, but this is what we did in Lyle. The church took a little, the developer took a little, the village gave us variance on, and the Forest Preserve agreed to something that was a variance for them, but we all went along, and we have another big. So I think that if you listen to the persons that have the details on reforms and things, and the funds that would have been devoted to a empty symbolism, it was hope, the emancipation, and the Juneteenth, it was hope. But Dr. King says, looking at it realistically from history, we see now that was hope unlived. And to me, in my kind of cryptic way of saying things, the Emancipation Proclamation was a layoff slip for a job you weren't getting paid for anyway. And then you had no stimulus. But I think that we can really, and then the African-American man particularly can say, I can always work and make a living in this country. It wasn't fair to me, but I can always make a living. And then the white citizen can say, yes, we have a clouded history, but the African-American will always be able to make a living in this country. And we can live together because we have a harsh truth to face. So I want to thank you. I hope I didn't go over time. And I didn't get into this educational program that we need to start early, where the children will learn the history in a healthy way, so when they get to 8th grade, then all of this elephant in the room stuff, you see, and they can go on. So those are some concrete things, and I'm going to leave it now, but there will be questions later. And please challenge me. Our church has done fantastic, and everybody thinks, when we get in those board meetings, boy, we go at each other like cats and dogs. But when we come out of there, we know what we're doing. So I hope you have some questions and maybe challenge on the feasibility or some historical insight.
Pastor Miller, that was excellent. I I had a question, and
Yes.
if other people as well. Can you just touch on I love the educational aspect point that you have to reduce the ignorance that's out there. The more people know, the better it is. Could you touch on that for a little bit?
Well, the first thing is it's coming out. And so we're discovering things that no one knew. And our children are going to have to deal with it. But the reason it's coming out is because it's the truth. It's a hard thing to look at. But the children are so, they just don't deal with it. You teach those kids, see, that was what's out of the history books, and we've got the educational experts, but to form an early childhood all the way up to the 8th grade. See, when they get in high school, you got the thing balanced pretty well. And that's how long it's going to take, and you're going to have all these reforms along the way to keep it. But the hope would be then that 2-year-old child, when they get out, and the 2-year-olds from all over, and everybody's satisfied, because I'll tell you, just want your own. Everybody doesn't want a mansion on the Black Sea. I'm here to tell you that. They don't require that. But, for happiness.
We have a question from Member Chaplin.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Reverend. So I had a question regarding, you talked about poverty and getting out of poverty. But how do we get out of poverty if we don't address systemic racism?
Thank you.
Is that connected, and do we need to have that conversation?
Those two are the core issues, and that's what I was referring to earlier. Now, I didn't touch on the racism as much as I did how it got in the country historically, but let me address the poverty aspect and how that might be a solution, because I don't have all the time. But, and of course, I said I was going to use terms that I haven't used before. But you've heard of reparation. This is not about reparation. They did a study that showed that the African American was on $350,000 each man, woman, and child, and that was $14.7 trillion. And so there's no need in talking about that. But what can we actually do? Well, the plan for $15 was figured 4 years ago, and it's supposed to go in another 3-4 years all over. And now, so that's in place, because they can't make a living. And if you have the economic incentives, but the person's got to be able to make a living. And that's already set. And I think that's where the poverty comes in for the individual. Now, the systemic part comes in with a lot of the ignorance we've had, a lot of the institutions that we've built based on the ignorance we've had, and the customs and things. That's why I'm not against the police department. Our protest in Lisle was DuPage AME Church in partnership with the Lisle Police Department. And we had very little visible police. And the people on our street came out. The anti-protesters joined us. Pro-life means pro-black. All life matters means black. They came along with us, and then some of the businesses on the route let us use the restrooms. They had water coming out, and we got to. So this is you got to have some policing, because we won't obey the 10 Commandments, and I'm not going to preach a sermon here. But you got, and the policing, but it's not policing now. Policing would be going around making sure everything's straight. They're not policing now. They're trained to get home. That's the terrible job to have. What if the training could be, we know you're coming home, but police the area. There's something here, something there. Because our police are now, my God, see, you can't. They're the one frontline soldiers dealing with this epitome of capitalistic poverty. You got the epitome of poverty on one side, and you got the epitome of entitlement on the other side. And they're both, I'll tell you. So we want the police to become police and not have to be, riot troops and soldiers and afraid for their lives from the crime that came from poverty.
Member Elliott?
So thank you for your really thoughtful remarks. I guess there's one piece that I struggle with, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on. That's the issue of community. As I, both as a board member and frankly more as a parent, try to process this through, I look at the number of opportunities my children have to be around people of color on a regular basis. It's more limited than frankly maybe I'd like it to be. And I suspect that there are, neighborhoods, I know there are neighborhoods where there's primarily people of color and they don't have access to, for example, white people as much as they should. So I'm wondering, can we solve these issues without a sort of a different form of community and without more integrated living communities? That's what I struggle with. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I appreciate your question, and that's why I think these conversations probably need to be repeated so we can really get into them. But I talked to my sister who retired as a diversity consultant for corporations. She was in a bank, and then she did that the last 10 years, where she went around doing the diversity and the sensitivity trainings for corporations and municipalities. And I just called her, said, you're the expert, and here's where I'm going. So what she said, the biggest challenge is that most of the races can spend their whole life never encountering the other person. And in the south side of Chicago, if you weren't a truck driver or school teacher, you were black, you see. And so I personally didn't encounter my first knowledgeable races until I went to school in Atlanta, and I'm driving my yellow Pontiac down there, and I stopped somewhere in Southern Illinois for a hamburger. And I walked in there, and 40 faces turned and looked at me. I lost my appetite so quickly. So I turned around slow. This is the type of thing. You talk about terror, I'll tell you about terror. But that's what's coming out, and that's where the sensitivity is coming, and now we are understanding things that we didn't. But we've got to make opportunities, because that's going to be key to afford opportunities for interaction. And they do it with sports a lot, but then that's such a rivalry, that sometimes if we could reconfigure some things, we could really do a lot to get the kids and young folks together.
Member Chaplin, did you have another question?
Yes, actually, thank you. Hang on one second. I'm just trying to get my video back. Thank you so much, Chairman. So I know you talked about not having Juneteenth. I thought you mentioned that it cost $800,000. Well, it's only going to cost the county about $40,000. And I have heard back from I have received several thank yous from some Black people that I know in DuPage County that thanked me very much for putting that initiative forward. So I'm kind of disappointed to hear you not wanting to include that. I think it's a great day, a great time to have people reflect and really learn the significance of Juneteenth. So, but it's that figure that was thrown out, $700,000 was not correct. I verified it with our county staff. If our holidays cost us $700,000 per holiday, we would never have a holiday at the county. So I hope that you might reconsider that, because, I did have a lot, I did receive, especially from some of my Black friends in DuPage, that really thanked me for bringing that forward.
I thank you. And those are the kind of questions that'll get us somewhere. And let me first say that they published that 700 and some odd figure in the Daily Herald. So that's where I got that. But the $40,000, would it, and this is not an elite conversation, this is what I go over to South Side, where the people you see are. Now I'm going to tell you, I got some second cousins who are thugs, Thugs, okay? If they walked in here now, you'd call somebody. But I asked one of them, and maybe we don't have the 800, if you could make 500, he told me he'd get married. I saw the hope. And so something to supplement one of the reforms. But and it's good to say And we're not going to stick. Every person here that's white doesn't feel the same way. Every black person doesn't feel the same way. So I'm speaking really for me. But, I'm the co-founder of the first Martin Luther King celebration in DuPage County because they didn't have one when I came. So I'm all for holidays. But it's hollow. It's hollow when it was a promise unfulfilled. Why would I celebrate? I'm not celebrating my anniversary for my first marriage. I'm not, because at this point, you see. So with the historical, I think we need education. There's things happening I never knew, Liz, that have happened in this country, and I don't think the African Americans. But I would like something that. I'd like to celebrate the 4th of July, is what I'd like to do. That's what I'd like to do. And all the other holidays gives one person a job. The Juneteenth grant that could be done in conjunction with somebody, and one life, that would take college for some child. And then you'd have I'm a spiritual person, you'd have somebody that could come that could say, I got this and I want to thank you. That's the healing, you see. So I don't have the answers, but I listen to all these stations and they got all the places to go, but they don't say what to do. So I offered concrete that I'm absolutely sure in my heart would make such a good difference that it could help the other things. Don't forget the daycare, though. That's important.
Thank you, Pastor Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Theodoia Gillespie of the Urban Quad League. Thank you so much, Ms. Gillespie. Thank you for being here.
Okay, there. Sorry about that. Again, my name is Theodoia Gillespie. I'm the president of the Quad County Urban League. Thank you for the invitation to be here and to share. As the discussion earlier talked about, racism and systemic racism. I had an opportunity to participate in a forum that was hosted by Congressman Bill Foster and Lauren Underwood. And so my comments today will be about inclusive. And I think that when we're able to sit down in a room like this, and that we're able to share our concerns and our issues and impact that everyday life that we're living in, it impacts us in being a successful individual or a successful adult. And I think that's what the cry out is, that you want to live in a community where you feel safe, that you feel included, and that you have a voice. And so part of that discussion that I had, and Michael was there as well, the young man said that what he would like to see is to have a more open dialogue with the police department, so they would understand these individuals, African American men, as human beings, and they would understand from the police perspective of what they require to do to protect our communities. And I don't think we don't have a lot of that dialogue going on, but in addition, we don't have a lot of respect for human being in general. I was on a conference call with our national president, Mark Morial, and he stated that someone mentioned, he's been getting this statement quite a bit, that all lives matter. And he said, absolutely all lives matter. But when Black lives matter, all of our lives would matter. And that is the conversation that we need to begin. Is that we're not taking anything from any one culture, but I think we need to understand people in general. And so when we look at what we can do collectively for our communities, I'm here to talk about how do we impact our communities in economic development, which means inclusive. And so that means that we look at young people, or we look at what our community needs and what the gaps are. And how do we fill those gaps to ensure that everyone is included in that process of being a successful adult individual. And so at the Urban League, we always look at careers and how careers, education and careers, and how that builds strong individuals and families. And that means they have to build a career, not a job, a career that will provide them the livable wage to take care of themselves and their family, and contributing back and investing back into their community. And we have a lot of that in DuPage County, because we have a lot of families, African American descent, who are doing extremely well, and even in some cases better than their counterparts. So young people don't understand when you single them out to be a bad individual or less than their friends. It's disheartening for them, and it's hard for them to understand why they're being attacked. And that's why you have this outcry, not just from the African American youth, but you have this outcry from all kids saying, what is going on? You ask us to be decent to all human beings, and we need to do that. And so I think that's the outcry. But what we have to really focus on is the inclusive of every individual in this community, and particularly African American young people. So part of that, what we talk about Economic Empowerment Center, part of the Urban League, is that we want to make sure that individuals have a pathway to personal self-care, which is addressing their basic needs, and then also dealing with what they need for their household income, and to begin to move them into establishing financial stability or wealth. Because we know that the history of African Americans or Black Americans, that we can generate wealth, as what Reverend Miller indicated. But we need to have the equal opportunity. So part of this discussion that I had with Congressman Foster and Congressman Underwood is that an African American young man, not in DuPage, who was in Kane County, one of our school districts, said that he was broken down. His interest was something else, but they didn't see his interest. They only saw the skin of his face. And he felt like he never had that support. And I had to apologize for some of the young people in the room, because we as African American leaders in our community should have done a better job in having discussions like this, so that our young people don't have to face the inequity they experience, not just in school, but in workplace and just the community in general. COVID-19 hit. People were losing their jobs, and most of their jobs were those individuals who had to do, that was manufacturing, hotels, restaurants, and that impacted a lot of individuals of color. Then you have the killing of George Floyd, and it just really angered the country so bad to see someone who was laid off because of a virus and then be treated less than a human being. That hurts. You don't understand it. And a lot of my friends who are white and maybe Republican came to me and said, Thea, I never knew that this environment was like this. I haven't experienced it. And so I think they expected me to say something different. But what I said was, you don't necessarily live it just because you're low income. This issue is not about someone who don't have the education or don't have the resources. This issues affect all of us. And we have to understand what may impact you may impact me totally different. And so when we start having these discussions about what do we need to do, we need to stand on more principle that if we're going to address the systemic racism, that we need to make sure that every individual have the opportunity in fairness. And so that's why the Urban League, along with my colleagues in the NAACP, focus on trying to build individuals so they can be successful. And we should not have policies or structure that will not allow that opportunity. And it's cultural, and it's a learning for all of us. You know, as African Americans, we're learning. As Caucasian, we're learning. As Asian American, we're learning. How do we live in a community that everybody is okay to be part of the system? And so all of this COVID, there's a lot of articles and foundations are talking about even how people view organizations that are led by African Americans. That there's a double standard how we, as African American, run our organizations that is viewed different than those who are running organizations that are have white leadership. And so we have to understand that it's there, it's systemic, it's everywhere, not just in your workplace, not just in your school, but it's everywhere. I attend meetings sometimes when I may be the only African American in the room. I'm okay with that because I've been doing that for a long time, even when I was in high school, you know, applying for leadership roles. But we have to understand that we have to live in a community where we understand the culture and that we understand that everybody has a right to opportunity, whether we believe it or not. And we can't talk about religion. We can't change your heart, but we can change the culture. And that's what we want to do. We want to begin to just change the culture. We can't change everyone's heart. So that part about lifting individuals up is what we want to do at the Urban League. In addition, when I talk about let's focus on the basic needs, because we have some communities in our community need a little bit more than others. And so we provide that support for them, which is whether it's housing insecurity, food insecurity, health care, which we know that's what COVID-19 revealed, that there is not adequate health care for everyone, mental health. And then the supportive services, sometimes we don't think someone may not need, but someone may need just a little bit more. When we look at the income, the minimum wage income in DuPage County, it's not enough to cover the entire need, whether it's housing, food, and your health. You need about $27 an hour to really live in this county successfully. So when we talk about how do we impact the economy, we need to impact to make sure that individuals have exactly what they need to be successful, and we need to change the culture that that's okay, that there's someone in our community that may not have the needs, but what can we do to invest in these individuals to be successful, and that they can feel included in a community that has not welcomed them before. And so I think we have an answer to talk about how do we invest, and I think that's one of the things that Reverend Miller talked about. You know, we invest certain resources that we lift a segment of our community up so they can have what they need, whether it's trying to get them not a job, but a career, so they can provide livable wage for their families, making sure that they have credentials that they can apply for certain jobs that will allow them to pursue those type of opportunities. And then just understanding whatever policies and structure that's in place, that they have to change. We have to be willing to change. Changes is not always easy. I'm one of these people, I have the same phone number that I had when I was got my first house. I have the same cell phone number when the first cell phone came out. I have the same cell phone company that I use. And, you know, so changes are hard, but sometimes they're necessary. And I think that's what we are, that we got to be willing to accept change. And I'm about policy. So when I'm at meetings, I want to make sure that we can have a discussion about what we can do to change the policy that's best for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Theodia. Ms. Theodia, if you want to just, receive any questions just for a few minutes. Does anybody, I have a question actually.
I can wait until Mike if you want to. I don't know if I took up
Oh, no,
15 minutes. Okay.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you. You brought up a really good point about the economic empowerment. And so when I passed the diversity inclusion imperative through my committee strategic planning, I thought of that as a base foundational piece for a lot of different activities, including economics. What we did discuss before, and I want to ask you if this is a good idea. Member Tim Elliott actually chairs the Economic Development Committee. Thank you, Member Elliott, you've been phenomenal. We were kind of regarding MBEs and DBEs, minority business enterprises and disadvantaged business enterprises. I thought that, every county, cities, they have a certain quota that they set aside to give these opportunities to people of minority communities. And that is something that we want to work on. We're having a dialogue on that. We have that program at the county. It's just about really getting it out there,
Right. And we have to wear masks, but it's hard talking in them. That is crucial, and I think Mike is going to talk about that we really need to embrace more African-American business into our culture, into our communities. And that's going to require a lot more than just saying, hey, we're here, is also providing the support. And a lot of times individuals don't know what they need to do to apply to become an MBA or a WB. And that's the kind of resources that we need to share. I mean, it's about working together. And I think I've been in this community in Clark County, Urban Lake, we service DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. And I used to serve on the Workforce Development Board here in DuPage County. All of that have to change. The makeup of the board, the makeup of those who are setting different policy, because you can't get it out there if a certain community is not part of that discussion. So absolutely working together to get information out there, but making sure that there's a representation across the community of those who are in our community to make sure that there's a voice for them.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Thank you, Ms. Gillespie. Our next speaker is President of the DuPage NAACP, Michael Childress. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I want to thank your committee. I want to start by, again, thanking Commissioner Colbert and the rest of the members here. It is an honor to be here. I was putting together some talk points, and I spent a lot of time doing it last night, and received a call from a young man. When I received the call, I kind of put this on hold to address what I thought was something that really needs to be addressed with the county board. I come from a historical perspective too, just like Dr. Miller. I've been an activist for over 40 years. I was an activist before I became president of the NAACP, and I'll be an activist after I'm no longer president of the DuPage chapter of NAACP. Activism is something that I started in my teens, probably even before then, because I was the paper boy of Fred Hampton. So that's how far I go back. And I can remember the scene, the Black Panther Party sitting on the stairs planning community activities when the rest of the world saw them as gangbangers and thugs. I didn't see them that way. I was a part of the breakfast program that they fed kids in the community. And they talked about education. And they talked about uplifting our community. So the images that we saw in the news was not my reality. Well, last night when I got the call, it was concerning a Blue Lives Matter protest and a counter protest to go along with it. Now, I don't particularly have a problem with anyone having a protest about whether they matter or not, okay? I don't see a problem when people have Black Lives Matter protests, because in my world, it shouldn't be a problem for somebody to ask to matter, to just matter, okay? So if the blue lives want to matter, that's fine. But to put it in perspective, the Blue Lives Matter protest is kind of irrelevant to society. And the reason I say that is not that they're not important, but they're the one profession that can determine whether I go home or I go someplace else. No other profession, not anybody on the county board, not anybody in the White House, no other profession has that ability to determine whether the person that they encounter today will go home. Will they spend more time with their children? Will they spend more time with their spouses? They have that power and ability, and we give them that power and ability. And the fact that we give them that power and ability should say to themselves, yeah, you matter. There shouldn't even be any question. You get up in the morning, you put on your blue uniform, you take your gun and your badge, and you go out and you do what we've given you the authority to do in the community. We ask that you do it in a very professional manner and enforce the laws that are on the books and not violate those laws. So, again, in theory, I have no issue at all with the Blue Lives Matter protest, a Rainbow Lives Matter, or any other lives that matter. So I don't see why there should be this huge outcry when black people say Black Lives Matter. And the majority of the protests are not black people. That's the thing that I really take pride in, is the fact that there's other communities out there that recognize that we matter. The groups that I'm talking to, they have black friends. At some point in my life, I hope I live long enough to see racism just fade away and crumble away, because my daughter has friends of all nationalities. And yeah, they don't like to see what happened to a George Floyd either. You don't have to be black to not know that that's wrong, and to understand that there was a crime committed that day. A man was murdered right before their eyes on live TV. You don't have to be black to recognize that. It's just something that we've been saying all along. But that little plastic piece here, this thing we call a cell phone, is now broadcasting around the world at the things that we've been saying for 400 years, and nobody paid attention to. So again, what I saw after having a conversation with this young man was a member of this county board disrespect the social protocols. I saw this county board member come within inches of a young lady's face and scream obscenities at her. An elected official. And we're here to discuss race relations in DuPage County. I saw the same county board member approach another young man and come within inches of his face and screamed obscenities at him. Again, an elected official. Then I open my email and I see a newspaper article where he told the same county board member, told a voting constituent to shove her vote up, you can figure out the rest. But we're here to discuss race relations. And these are people that sit on the county board. Okay, so that being said, again, I go back to that same day after seeing that. Sunday morning, Madam Secretary and I was going down to Springfield to meet with the president of the state. And as we're driving down, then we see or hear that the President of the United States has tweeted out white power. But we're here to discuss race relations. Okay? So the thing that I got out of last night's talk with this young man was these kids, I'm not going to call them kids, these young adults are doing what we taught them to do. I was them 40 years ago. We're trying to treat them as if they really don't know. They said that about me a long time ago when I said Johannesburg, because that's how I got involved. When I got involved with the ending of apartheid, that was my baptism into activism. When I learned about a Mandela being placed in a prison for 30 years, that he could have gotten out in 1 year. All he had to do was say, I accept apartheid. And when they brought it to him and said, we'll let you go, he said, shut the door. For 30 years, he would never accept apartheid. And when I learned these things, I became an activist too. And that's why I spend as much time as I do with the youth of this community, because I was them 40 years ago. I told him, you know, you can't give in to being treated like you really don't know. You know, you spend time educating yourself, understand your issues, and stand up for your issues, and it doesn't matter if a county board member approaches you, disrespects your social distancing without a mask, and screams in your face. Because, again, we're here to discuss race relations. Now, I'm going to move a little bit forward because I'm a big believer of understanding what I'm saying. I would not come before you without knowing what I'm saying. So I took the time before I came here. That's why I was late. I wanted to look it up. And Article 1 of the Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an established religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging freedom of speech or press or the right of people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. I don't see anything that this Black Lives Matter doing. Now you have to separate the two. There are provocateurs that are trying to co-opt the Black Lives Matter movement with chicanery and illegal behavior. But there's two distinct groups there. And the first group is adhering to that Article 1 of the United States Constitution, the very first article of our Constitution. So, again, when I spent time with that young man, who is white, and he's very intelligent, we have talked about doing what we think we need to do in exercising your right to vote. And don't ever allow anyone to tell you to take your vote and shove it someplace. No, you take your vote and you shove it in the ballot box. That's what we're going to do. We're going to shove our votes in the ballot box. That's what we shove it. Now, that being said, that disturbed me. Now I'll get to what I actually came here for, was for inclusion. Okay? Again, I'm a person that loves numbers because numbers have no race, no creed, no color, no nationality. They're just numbers. It's what we do with those numbers that make all the difference in the world. Well, the black population of DuPage County is about 42,000, of which 29,000 are of voting age. Doesn't mean they're all registered to vote, but they're about voting age. Okay? And then I tried to sit down last night and look up how many black people have ever served on the DuPage County Board. Sadia came up. The only name ever came up. I looked and I looked. It took me about 2 hours last night. Sadia was the only one that came up. So when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, diversity and inclusion, it's an opportunity. Right now, it has touched not only DuPage County, but the entire world. You see Black Lives Matter movement from one end of the globe to the other. It is the intention of the NAACP to take that opportunity to consolidate that potentially powerful voting bloc. We're looking to consolidate blacks of all ages, millennials, white Gen Xers, and white Gen Zers. And we want to consolidate that group to fight this scourge of racism throughout our communities. Because contrary to popular belief and contrary to some people on this county board, these kids do know what they're talking about. And racism is wrong. And we won't have a more perfect union until it's gone. And it starts with them. Because apparently our generation hasn't gotten it done, so they intend to take the step to get it done. And I applaud them. I do not treat them as anything outside of an equal, because they got a whole lot of ideas and a way of looking at things that I haven't considered. But the one thing about young adults is they're willing to listen to us and look at things that maybe they haven't considered either. So the conversations are strong, and the conversations are long, and my phone rings off the hook all the time. So with that said, I have more questions than I have answers. I don't have the answers to how to fix this community. But I think that the secret is in our young adults. So the question that I have, if we want to solve some of these issues, is I have to ask the county board, what is the affirmative action plan of the DuPage County Board? Is there one? Do we have it? Did we implement it? What's the status of it? What's the goal of it? How is it measured? How do you know if it's working? What's the timelines? Are there deliverables and are there measurables? Because other than that, you're just making speeches. I think I said something last night, I was on a call, where people tell you what they're for. When politicians tell me what they're for, they're just making speeches. Because I always have this little guy sitting on my shoulder that when I hear politicians tell me what they're for and what we got to do and what has to be done, the little man that's whispering in my ear is always asking, how? Because that's a big piece of it. How? We want free schools. How are you going to do it? We want to end racism. How are you going to do it? I'm always asking myself how when I hear what needs to be done. So that's the question that I have. The next question I have is how many employees are employed in DuPage County? What's the diversity makeup of it? What's the plan to recruit black employees? Is there one? Do we have one? I don't expect anyone here in this room to have an answer for that today, but we will expect you to get back to us on that. That's one thing about it. I didn't come here to put anybody on the spot, but I wanted these questions out there so that we could start to do the research and help move those things along. And then the next question I have is how many black businesses do we do contracts with in DuPage County? And is there a process to recruit black contractors? And if they are, and that doesn't just mean black contractors, we'll say contracts with people of color and women. What's that plan? Because it's not widely known in the community if there is one. Okay. Then here's another fundamental question that I really do have. In this country, as well as DuPage County, your access to funding, jobs, and the better schools is built around your zip code. And we know that this is a census year. So we also know that there's going to be some redistricting. So the question becomes, does the county board have any input into how those districts are drawn? And how is that process going to be handled? And will there be people of color giving input into those redistricting zones? And then I will differ, and probably the only time in my life I've ever disagreed with Pastor Miller. I do support Juneteenth as a day, as a holiday. I support it wholly. But I don't support it as just a day off work. I support it as a day of education and a day of service, just like Martin's birthday. I believe that that day of education should be taught. This country has heaped all sorts of atrocities on people of color, from the Native Americans to the Africans and everybody in between. And that history, if we're ever going to heal, needs to be taught. Not to make anybody feel bad or to point fingers at anyone, but to heal. We can talk about all sorts of, we know we have black scientists, black entertainers, black athletes, and we celebrate them all the time. We know they're there. What is never taught in any book, anywhere, is about how the NAACP was formed because of the race riots in Springfield, Illinois. It's been wiped off the history books. Black Wall Street wiped off the history books. St. Louis riots wiped off the history books. And as long as we continue to teach this sanitized version of what's going on in our communities, we will continue to learn a displaced version of history. So again, I applaud Dr. Miller, great educator, and he understands our sense of history. And if you have a couple of hours, he'll tell you all about it. He knows about the atrocities that have happened in this country. And it's time that we all open our eyes to it. And with that, I will end and take any questions.
Member Liz Chaplin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for your words today. I think you were brave to bring the topic that you brought up, because I think you had courage to bring up what one of our board members' bad behavior, and I applaud you for that. I really think your words today were so needed. I think you were brave to talk about racism and what's going on in our country, and how, we in our county, and how we address it. I have been very concerned about the escalating racism in DuPage starting last fall. I mean, even before that. I have 3 kids.
Member Chaplin, we can't hear you. Your computer screen froze.
I thought that only happens to me.
It happened to me too one
So if
time.
I have to reboot, I had to do it last night, I think, a couple of times.
Yeah. We don't have any raised hands on the Zoom. Member Greg Hart.
Thank you, Michael, and it's been an honor to know you and work with you in different capacities, but I think the reason why I wanted to mention something is that we look forward to working with you in the future. I think the 4 issues that you mentioned, ranging from affirmative action plan all the way through redistricting, are items that this board does need to consider. And I look forward to work with Member Covert and all the colleagues from DuPage County Board, but also all the community colleagues on addressing those issues, because while we may not have all complete answers now, I know we need to get to them and soon. And it's going to be a process that we're working through, not just after we get our initial recommendations, but on an ongoing basis, because we all have to do better, and it doesn't just end when we put together a plan. We need to enact it. So that's all I wanted to say. I just want to thank you for being here and raising those topics today.
Well, thank you, but I want to make sure everybody knows, full disclosure, many of the board members are members of the NAACP, and we're working shoulder to shoulder on a lot of issues, not just necessarily racism. I want to applaud you for what you did last week when you opened the clinic out south. We traveled out and got tested, and so again, the whole thing, people say systemic racism. I'm not sure what that means. I know it's wrong. I like the word institutional racism, because many of the institutions are corrupt, from the banking to housing to schools. Those are institutions I can relate to. I'm not sure if I can relate to systemic. It's just too broad of a term to me. But again, people will use it, and if they're comfortable with it, that's fine. I see what many members of the county board have done is address some of the institutions that have created disparity in the communities. And again, I applaud you and all the members that are members of the NAACP, because again, this fight is not a partisan fight. There's no Democrat, Republican type of thing. It's about getting it done. I like to say the world is full of problem staters, and they're okay, but the world applauds problem solvers. And there are some on this county board that are truly out there to solve problems, and I applaud you for it.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Thank you. Yes, Member Chaplin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you. So sorry about that. But like I said, I just appreciate everything you said today. And, I think a big part of what we're seeing with maybe some board members is, if we don't understand an issue, right, how can we address it? I think, I play some instruments. So I always think about, when I start learning my instrument at first, I'm playing and it doesn't make any sense. And then as you learn the theory behind it, you understand, and you're such a better musician because you understand why you're doing something. And so I've been really trying to have, the workshops for the county board members on racism and implicit bias. And I think it would be such a good opportunity for us to learn and grow. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. I mean, do you think workshop meetings like that would help, the board members, especially with some of the problems we've been having, especially what just happened over the weekend?
Given my thought process, I find value in it as long as there's a plan to do something afterwards. It can't be what I coin as a sugar high or a feel-good thing that you do, and everybody feels good about it for about a couple of days or a week, and then they go away, and a week later, it's a book you dust it off and put in a corner, or you propping a door open with it. Then it really hasn't done anything, hasn't done what it's intended to do. I guess it gets down to what's the outcome that you're trying to accomplish, and is there a plan in place to accomplish that? And then again, my big word is how you're going to do it. That's really where I come down at.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other member Tim Elliott?
I'm really glad you said that, because honestly, that's sort of my biggest concern over what I've seen over the last, I guess it's month or so. We all have a lot of friends and colleagues and neighbors, and many of us have been out and marched or demonstrated and shown sort of very public support for the cause. And my concern is that you've got a lot of people in DuPage County, both in government and frankly in our communities, that may feel like, okay, I've checked that box. I was out there, I was visible, people saw me, and so I've checked that box and I've demonstrated, that I stand with Black Lives Matter, I stand for equality, and then they go back to their schools, their jobs, their whatever, and feel like they've done their bit. And quite candidly, and I'm not saying this cynically, but I'm saying I have concern, and I hope we have a plan going forward. This meeting today is great, but it's, I think, as Reverend Miller said, if it's going to go anywhere, it has to be the start of a conversation.
Absolutely.
Because what I don't want is for people on the board to, post Facebook and say, oh, today I went to this meeting and it was great, and I've checked the box and there you go. And I've listened, I think, quite closely, and sort of my purview on the DuPage County Board is economic development, and I think Ms. Gillespie spoke about the workforce development, and that's something I for sure want to follow up with, because I'd like to understand ways that we in the county, but also in our private lives as employers, as community members, can each do just that little bit more. Because I think if we could each find a concrete way to do that little bit more, that adds up. If nothing else beyond that, that adds up. I'd like to do more beyond that. So I certainly hope that we'll have some sort of a roadmap going forward for that. So thank you.
That is actually my hope too. Is like Dr. Miller said, this is the start. This can't be the end of it all. Again, I'm honored to be here, and I'm super honored the fact that you were here. I'm here understanding that you respect my opinion to even ask me to be here. So now that we know what we know, there's still, to coin another phrase from somebody in the Bush administration, there's still some unknown knowns out there that we just don't know. We don't know. And as we start to uncover these things, what we thought we may be headed down a certain path, we may find out that that's not the problem at all. So we have to be dynamic enough to change courses as needed. And if we don't, then we'll end up a year from now saying the same things, what we need to do, as opposed to how we're going to do it. Again, I do applaud the county board. I respect the county board a lot, because there are some areas in this country and in this state that don't listen to the community. okay? And the fact that we're here having this conversation says a lot about your board. Again, I don't fall down on Republican, Democrat, one way or the other. I fall down on what are you doing? Malcolm X once said, you judge a person by their conscious deeds. What did they intend to do? And that's how you judge them. You don't judge them on race, creed, color, or anything else. What was their conscious deeds? And I watched the conscious deeds of members of this county board, good and bad. And what did they intend? And not that the fact that a person may have made a mistake. Could have made a mistake, and that's okay. But what was what consciously were you trying to, what was the impression you were trying to give up when you did it? That's really where we're at. And again, we've had members of the board call us up and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? You know, when other areas, they rubber stamp whatever they want to stamp, and the constituents have to deal with it. So I think that the respect that some members of the county board give to the community is a very positive thing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael Childress. I don't see any questions, but what we're going to do right now is we are going, well, first I'm going to thank all our speakers for coming in today, and then we are going to, I would like to have all the speakers come up so we could take a picture with Member Healy. I didn't see any. Oh, Regina. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't see your hand, Mr. Healy. Member Healy. Yes, Ms. Regina Brett.
Am I
Microphone.
Pushing the wrong
thing. So this is open dialogue or public comments?
We're gonna switch over to open dialogue after we just take pictures, and then we're gonna take a 5-minute break and then jump into open dialogue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're getting into it. I'm not ending this. Don't worry. I like this dialogue. So if I could just ask all the presenters to step up so we could get a quick picture with you all.
There, where we go?
By the podium.
Okay.
And then we will take a 5-minute break, and then we'll regroup for open dialogue and public comment.
Keep our distance so we don't have masks on while we take the picture.
Sure. Okay. Right.
Seats, please, so we can continue to open dialogue. Thank you. Moving on to our next agenda item, open dialogue. And instead of doing our traditional round robin that we usually do, I'm going to open the floor up to our committee members and our committee members who are here physically present and also the ones that are on Zoom. And then as for the public, we will, once we conclude open dialogue, we will move on to public comment. So right now, we're going to open the floor up to open dialogue, and people who are on Zoom who have just joined us, please raise your hand by pushing the button on your computer screen so I could see your hand. All right, let's begin. You guys, this is the fun part. Regina.
Good afternoon, everyone. While I have been here so many times, and this I consider to be one of my second official homes. Over the years I've come here, and it's been a pleasure and a joy. And you know, every time I'm here to either beg for something or to receive something. And so I want to give a heartfelt thanks to the chairman and to the board for all those wonderful years we've had since I've been coming here. Also want to thank the guests that are here, Reverend Miller, Theodia Gillespie, and Mike Childress and his wife, Margaret, for accompanying me here today. Thank you, Jonathan and Sadia, for inviting us, and Jim for improvising this census differently than what you've done before. You took the time to answer a call, and I want you to know that I appreciate that. I just want to say, too, that Liz, I understand the Juneteenth's concern about making it a holiday, and I'm a little different than Mike. I sort of agree with Pastor Miller, and not because I'm a member of his church, but it's because I think if him and I had discovered that we had been free for 2 years, we'd have been very upset of the fact that it was promised to us 40 acres and a mule. And black people as a whole don't feel the same way about the holiday issue, but I would only suggest to you that you take a pulse on that, do some dialogue on it with many other blacks to find out how they feel. I think that if reparations had taken place, that would be well acceptable. But for right now, we would only be doing the same thing we do on the 4th of July, which I have a problem with that one too, because of Independence Day, and neither then or now have we felt that independent. So just as a friend, and I admire your work and what you do, I just think that maybe you want to take a pulse on that with other blacks about Juneteenth. I want to talk about also the removal of the statues over the time period that we've experienced this situation with George Floyd and the removal of flags. Just this morning, I woke up to an old segment of the Golden Girls where Don Cheadle was a guest on there, and she wanted to celebrate the Confederate flag, and he was a friend of hers, and he was very offended by that. But we also understand the history of the Confederate flag when it comes to Caucasian people. It's something to be proud of. That was your great-grandfathers and your grandmothers and everybody else who had fought in the Civil War, and we get that. But in the meantime, as I've told people about Gone with the Wind, oh, Regina, that's a beautiful love story. And I said, no, not to the African-American race. I saw nothing lovable about Gone with the Wind. I loved Clark Gable. I thought he was very handsome. But the meaning of Gone with the Wind said that my people were enslaved, and the Civil War had taken place, and they still weren't free, as you can see with Juneteenth. There's 2 PBS specials on, if you can catch it. It's on demand with Comcast. And it tells you about Reconstruction Part Series 1 and 2. I think if you took a look at that, you'd learn a lot from it. Also, when we talk about the fact that there's a disparity of African American people missing in certain places, in neighborhoods, in government, even in churches, we should always walk in a room and say to ourselves, when we don't see anybody other than ourselves, who's missing and why aren't they here? Because if you ask yourself that, I don't want you to only come up with an answer. I want you to come up with a call to action to change it, because that's where it really matters and that's where it really counts. And I want to say thank you to all the people. I think, Jim, you and I had a lengthy conversation when George Floyd was killed and there was an issue with police reform. And I want to thank Keith for greeting me at the door this morning, issuing his sincere apologies for it. Not that you owe us an apology because you didn't do it, but the departments that are created that have police officers that are in there that are supposed to be 1% of the force is not supposed to be that important. How is it 90% of the police officers are good and 1%, 99 are good and 1% are bad? Are we allowing that 1% to overshadow those good officers who put their lives on the line every day for us, black, white, whatever the race? We allow that 1% to put us in a bad position with one another. So I'm asking you today, that your legislation, your policies from a county board level could help African American people in DuPage County and all across this state if you start thinking about what will your grandchildren say when you had the power to make change, but you didn't. Or when you had the power to make change and you did. Think about what your grandchildren would want to hear about you one day. And Mike, you mentioned blacks have an opportunity to be in office. We also have an obligation as a black community to run for office. I tried to do that. I was just testing the waters. By the way, I'm going to tell Chairman Cronin, you and Jim saw there looking very comfortable up there in his seat. But I'm feeling comfortable here in Sam's seat. So when you see Sam, tell him thank you, because I know that I tried to make that run twice and it does feel mighty comfortable. But I found my passion and my gift, and I asked God if I could do his will. And Pastor Miller always, forever, teaches us that if you put God first, then you are worthy of answering his call. As long as you have a great deal of leadership that's going to allow people to become equal and have equity. That's what leadership is all about. That all races, all creeds, LGBTQS or whatever it is, are included in your leadership. And so I thank you again for inviting us, and I pray every day that this pandemic lifts. It's been a pleasure as always to see you. It's just under different circumstances this time because I don't get any gratification of coming before an audience about inequality. But I do get gratification in asking to be made whole as an African American woman, as an African American, and as a descendant of many ancestors, both black and white. that are the reason for us being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Member Healy.
I'll take a moment or two. I think people have to understand, I came from a very strange background. My father was a very big supporter of Dr. King, and that is how I grew up having to refer to him. I was never allowed to call him Martin Luther King. He was always to be called Dr. King in our household. My father marched with him, and my father was a big supporter. But at the same time, I noticed some inconsistencies that I inherited from him, and that is when people talked in a discriminatory way, in a very racist way, I always found that I didn't say anything. I just kind of shut up, and I just ignored them. As I get older, as many people on this board have found out, I become a little bit more vocal. And now more and more of my friends know that, that racial statements of any kind are not something that I'm going to tolerate an awful lot. And I start taking them to task on that. I've always felt discrimination was stupid. I never saw the reason for it. Again, the way I was brought up, I mean, you're looking at the person who was the guest of honor opening up Dorothy Tillman's ward office. Yes, I was. I was the Third Ward Alderman at Des Plaines, and Dorothy Tillman was the Third Ward Alderman of Chicago. We got together, we became friends, and Dorothy for years, and I kept in touch, and she helped me many times, and I helped her many times with either jobs when I worked with Secretary of State Edgar, or she had helped me on a rural fire prevention district issue. I never saw why. It's just something I never did. And I agree that education is the key. And I always want to, people talk about DuPage County. I always want to point to the fact that the first African American elected, in my opinion, in my understanding, in DuPage County was O.C. Davenport from District 204 in Naperville. And that was when the African American population was maybe 1 or 2% of the entire county and maybe 1% of District 5 at that time. But O.C. not only got elected, she got reelected and was president of 204 for several years. Also, we had Kenny Moy, Yolanda Capizano. So I'm going to go to what the Reverend said. And what he talked about was that when he went into the basement of his house, he saw some light up ahead. But he didn't realize until he turned around all the light that was coming from behind. And I think we have to see where we have been, see that we have moved forward in many ways. And as Michael had said, where are we going from here? And sometimes it's in very incremental and small steps that you finally get to where you want to go. It took me 7 years with a lot of other people to build a children's center. I've been talking about a DBE in DuPage County for over a decade now, and we actually had a study done, and we're moving forward. And in fact, through the Illinois State Association of Counties, we're talking about, is there a possibility to do a Collar County one so that all the counties can join at the same time? Action, not just constantly words. But I like the fact that we are talking about this, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. I have a lot of friends on the Cook County Board who are African American. And my proudest thing is when they turn to me and say, "Are you sure you're a white Republican?" And I look at them and I go, "How do you know what race my mother was?" And I always love putting people on the spot like that, because then all of a sudden they're sitting there going, I said, "How do you know my mother or father weren't part African American or part Hispanic or something else?" And what I love about when you do that is that it puts people totally on the spot, and they no longer, treat you the same, which I think is good, because then they become a little bit more honest in how they do that. I don't want to hear some of the negative things that some people are saying on those things. I want them to start thinking and moving forward. What we've done here today is really great, but I don't want this to be a one-time thing. Okay, it can't be a one-time thing. And I'm proud that my district has elected someone of color who is also Muslim, who understands these things. And we've talked about, her bullying and things of that nature that she has felt over her lifetime and stuff like that. And again, I've never understood the Muslim thing too. I'm Greek Orthodox. So I knew from a young age, I had, my yaya walking around with a babushka at all times. She went to the church, she wore a veil. So, I get some of those things. I guess I just don't fear any of those things. But we have to carry this on, and we have to talk about Hispanic and Latinos. We have to talk about Asians. We have to talk about Indian and Pakistanis. We have to talk about Muslims, Jews, LGBTQ, women, disabled, homeless, senior citizens, Native Americans, and teens. My kids growing up, always felt they were picked on by the Naperville police. As a parent, sometimes I felt they might have been, and other times they were not picked on. They should have been, taken the task for things they did, especially parkouring on the second floor of a shopping center. But these are just we're starting the conversation. And Michael kept saying, yet we are here discussing discrimination, even though we have all these bad things in the past. As the Reverend said, if you look behind, it's a hell of a lot better than it was, but the light ahead is still dim. We still have a long way to go, and we have to keep those conversations going, and we have to bring other people in. So I've encouraged Sadia and I've encouraged Chairman Cronin to change around the Census Committee a little bit. We already have the rounded, leadership throughout the county of the people we need. We should bring on the sheriff, who has done some really great things, and the state's attorney, and start opening that conversation, like Michael said, as to what do we do next? What are our next step? Who, what, where, when, why, and how? I mean, that's what we need to hear about, we need to learn about, and we need to take action on as to what the future is going to be in this county and how we can move those things forward. And until we look at and hear these things and hear these hearing sessions, we're not going to know how to move forward. We can start making some of those changes, but as the Reverend said, there's light in back of us from the past, but the future is looking better. But we have to keep moving towards it. And I think this is a great committee that we can, ask the chairman to continue on and have some more meetings as we go forward. So thank you very much. I spoke too long.
Thank you, Member Healy. Alderman Patty Smith. You're muted.
Yes, am I good? Can you guys hear me?
Hey, Patty.
I really don't want to go behind Healy, but I guess I kind of have no choice. So I'm Alderman Patty Smith. I represent the 8th Ward for the city of Aurora, which is all in DuPage County. So thank you for all the speakers today. I really, I get a lot out of listening, and it is time for us to listen. And so what I wanted to share with you all today is the steps that we've taken in the city of Aurora as we're moving forward. We believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere, and city of Aurora has developed what is called a Change Reform Initiative. And CHANGE stands for Community Helping Aurora's Necessary Growth and Empowerment. And we're in phase 1 right now. And what phase 1 is, it is a complete review of our police force policies. It's a complete review of our police training policies, a complete audit of our body cameras, and also exploring and implementing a civilian review board as part of our police department. In addition, in phase 1, we are starting our own listening campaign. We are offering, starting next week, we have like 5 or 6 sessions, 2-hour sessions where people can come, and we'll start out with getting their input on police force and what they have felt, or the experiences that they have had, or the ideas that they may have. So from that session, we will move into the training sessions. Again, we will have our council there, we will have city representatives there, we will have our police force there, and we will have our citizens there, where people are going to have the opportunity to talk, so that we have the opportunity to listen. And, in adding on to what the speakers said, we do need to continue to listen, but we do need to take actions. But I'm very proud of the initiatives that the city of Aurora has taken on, and we are definitely heading in the right direction to make change for our municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Patty Smith. Anybody else? Yes. Yes, Regina.
So Alderman Penny Smith it is?
Regina, your mic. Okay.
Patty Smith. I'm founder and president of an organization called Unity Partnership, and I've worked with Chief Zeman over the years over there in Aurora. We were there when the Harry Pratt water company had the shooting, and we went over to show our sympathy toward the officers who were injured as well as the people who had been killed on the premises there. We try very hard to keep our relationship through partnering with them whenever something happens, and not only them, but all the other police departments across the state practically. We are working with, I would say, 2 police chiefs out of, well, 3 actually, Naperville, Lisle, and Darien. And we're going to be looking forward to finding out what low-hanging fruit we can have them to try to change by a stroke of a pen under the jurisdiction of the chiefs. Whatever they can do on the local level, we're in discussions with them, and whatever they can do on the legislative level, we're going to be speaking with the state's attorney and possibly, hopefully, the AG. So thank you for those sessions. I live in Aurora, so I'm happy to hear that you will be having those sessions, and I hope to be able to be available to attend some of them. Thank you so much for that.
So just to follow up on that, you can look at all of the dates and times if you go on the Aurora City website, and you go on. You need to sign up for them because obviously with social distancing, we want to make sure that we have enough room for everybody there. So just go online and the City of Aurora and take a look at what we have to offer. They're days, afternoons, and evenings.
Thank you, City of Aurora, Mayor Irvin, Alderman Smith, Regina. I mean, I'm just so happy to see everybody coming together towards, concrete solutions here. And this problem it has several layers. It's not just one approach. There's so many approaches, and there's so many. It's like an onion, right? You got to keep peeling, and there's layers of it. And I do want to thank our chairman for being so cooperative for years, in promoting diversity and inclusion. And I've only been on the board for a year and a half, and I have seen appointments being made to committees with African American candidates and Hispanic and people of color. And I was really proud to see that effort being made. The votes on it, sometimes I was disappointed, not everybody voted for that particular person, but, people have their opinions. But, we are looking at how to become better allies, and that's why we're here today. And I'm just really proud of the work that all of our members are doing towards progress. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've been working at this Unity issue. I was on the board of Unity Partnership, and I think I'm reduced to advisory now. Oh, thank you. Creating that unity in DuPage County in our community is so important for people to come together. And, even with the hate crime law that I helped co-author and the police trainings and doing these seminars, the work continues. We can't stop. We cannot be comfortable. We have to work with all groups. We just can't stop. And the important thing that I learned today, about issues that we spoke about is it is so important for us to listen to communities instead of assuming that, assuming something's right for you, for your community. That's not right. We need to listen, and we need to have that dialogue and ask you, what can we do to improve? And I really enjoyed listening to everybody. Our presenters were great. So I am going to ask, we have a hand up. Member Chaplin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So Patty Smith, I was just wondering if she could possibly send Aurora's plan with all their phases maybe to me or somebody at the county, because I'd be really interested in seeing that plan, and maybe it's something that, you know, the committee could adopt. And also, I was also wondering, I'm not clear if this committee is going to take the lead on the framework, you know, look at the policies, or will this committee be giving that to somebody else? I'm not quite sure of the next steps. That's the question I have. And then also too, yeah, we did have a lot of good appointments, but also there's been some important legislation and things that the county had the opportunity to act on that benefits people of color that we didn't. In 2017, there were bail and bond reforms, and our legislative agenda was opposing those bail bond reforms. And even though Kane County understood the financial impact that was going to have on their budget, they were in favor of those reforms. And I spoke on this on the board floor, and I was the only one that opposed the legislative agenda because those bail and bond reform, because we were opposing those bail and bond reforms, and I voted no on that. You know, we also had the opportunity to join King County in asking our federal representatives to address DACA early in 2017, and we didn't do that either. So I think there's a lot of things just besides appointments that we really need to look at. I hope going forward, if we have another opportunity to vote on things that help people of color, that the board will be taking a positive stand on that. So I think, you know, there's a lot of other issues that come up along with that. And but it was a very good meeting today, and thanks. I appreciate everybody for being here.
Thank you,
Liz, if I could just address really quickly, I'm happy to send you that, or you can just go on the City of Aurora's website, and right at the bottom, you'll see change in big blue letters, and it has all the details. I just gave you an overview of it. That will give you all the details of it as well.
Thank you. Member Tim Elliott. Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions or open dialogue? Any comments? Okay. We're going to open it up to public comment.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. We have 12 public comments that I'll go right into. First one is Lisa Sullivan from Elmhurst, Illinois. Subject, Pete DeCiani. The comment reads, Mr. DeCiani's response to a voter to, quote, stick you, sick bracketed, vote up your ass, quotation, close quotation, was inappropriate and deserving of censure, especially when raised in response to concerns expressed about the treatment of our Black and POC residents. It was appalling. Please vote to censor him.
Greg, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you, please, for a second? We have a gentleman here for we do not. Okay. Would you like to have public comment? We're giving the courtesy to people who have come in person. Greg, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to interrupt you. And
no, that's okay.
And yeah, we have one public comment here in person, and then we could continue with the submitted ones.
I don't know the format for this. My name's Ed Miner. I live in Elmhurst, and I have for a number of years. And
Member Covert, we can't hear anymore.
If we could, yeah, we're going to turn the microphone on.
it's on. I'll get closer. Again, my name is Ed Miner. I live in Elmhurst, Illinois. Ed Miner, Elmhurst, Illinois. I've lived in Elmhurst for a long time, and I have worked for a number of years on trying to address social justice issues, especially with racism. I believe I'm a student of history too, and I buy the idea that the United States was developed, became a country based on an idea. We're the only country that ever did that, and that was Thomas Jefferson's idea that all men are created equal. I think in today's environment, we might include women in that, but that's still aspirational. All men, all women are not yet created equal. When I've worked with people, with white people on racism, there is not a white supremacist that I know, at least not one that, any of the tiki torch guys, I don't know anybody like that. Everybody I know is a good person. And, they're a good person because they haven't used the N-word in 50 years, or their best friend is black or whatever. And my attitude and what has influenced me on racism is a book by Ibram Kendi called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And there's two significant points that he made in that book. One is to say that there's two kinds of people in the world. There's racists and there's anti-racists. And if you're not working to try to get rid of racism, then you fall into the racist category. We've heard the phrase, silence is violence or silence is compliance, and it's really easy to not speak up and to just let it go. And we can't afford to do that anymore for a whole lot of reasons. The other thing that was really important in that book, and I think is relevant to what the county is doing, or what the city of Elmhurst would be doing, is his point about addressing a policy and say, if we're considering a policy, consider who benefits from that policy. Consider who is disadvantaged by that policy, and see if that addresses into racist or bigoted one way or the other reasons. And I think that's an important thing to do. I didn't hear all of the mission statement that we had. I don't know if the county has anything like an equality statement. That would be awesome if we did. But use a mission statement to say, here's some new piece of legislation or policy, and let's see what happens, who benefits and who gets hurt by that. And make sure that those are not discriminatory in those pieces. Somebody mentioned the idea of a anti-racism workshop for maybe the board or maybe some other parts of that. I am very much in favor. It's really hard as a white person to recognize the institutional racism that we heard about today. It's everywhere and it's everything. And I will just close by giving you a real brief synopsis. I taught for a number of years at Trinity High School, and I've kept in Facebook contact with a couple people. The most chilling Facebook post I ever got was just a few weeks ago from one of my students. And she posted, how old were you the first time a cop ever pulled a gun on you? Cop has never pulled a gun on me ever. She goes, I was 17. She was my student when she was 17. This is a Catholic school. She's walking home with her polo shirt and her plaid skirt. Everybody in metropolitan Chicago recognizes that as a Catholic girls' school uniform. Somehow, cop pulled a gun on her. What was even more chilling was to read the responses. There were 30 or 40, 17, 16. I was 12. Boys were 12, 13, 14 years old. Girls 16, 17, 18. Cop has never, ever pulled a gun on me, ever. And I've never even come close. And I don't want that kind of stuff to happen. It shouldn't happen in DuPage County. It shouldn't happen in Elmhurst. And our policies we need to educate ourselves so our policies are not bigoted and anti-racist so that we can live up to that liberty and justice for all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Greg, we're going to continue with the submitted public comments. Please continue.
Thank you. The second submission is from Rebecca Fortner from Lombard. Subject is District 2 member behavior. The comment reads, I am writing as a constituent of District 2 to express my utter shock and disappointment in the disrespectful and unsafe behavior of Member DeCiani. Those holding public office have been placed in a position of trust, and their behavior must reflect that trust. Member DeCiani does not. It is a shame that the board must spend precious time dealing with this, but it must. I support the censure of DeCiani and hope that the leadership shown by Member Chaplin to address this will be followed by the rest of the board. Third submission is from Kelly Dunkel, Lombard. Subject, Pete DeCiani. The comment reads, June 30th, 2020. Attention, DuPage Complete Count Committee. Hi, my husband and I, along with other neighbors, are part of District 2 in DuPage. We saw, read, and learned some behaviors that Pete DeCiani demonstrated this weekend at a rally in Elmhurst for the police. We have concerns since he is supposed to be the chairman of Health and Human Services for DuPage, but yet he was not wearing a mask and was yelling at faces of constituents. He also responded to an email of a DuPage resident writing, he stood up for the cops today, along with go stick her vote in her A underline S. From my understanding at this rally, there were representatives of teenagers and adults for Black Lives Matter. First of all, this type of behavior does not represent myself and others in our district. I understand individuals disagree on issues, but as a chairman of DuPage, there are also appropriate ways to communicate with others. In any job that individuals have, if a person has unprofessional, inconsiderate behaviors in emails or talking with others, most individuals are fired from their job. Another example, if a person owns a business, anyone in that business cannot be inconsiderate of others. My next issue is with the coronavirus. It is understandable that Illinois is opening up more, but the coronavirus is still there. Especially as a chairman of Health and Human Services of DuPage, he should be more than well scientifically educated on the coronavirus with wearing a mask and social distancing. My last point is, as chairman of DuPage, he should be bringing communities together with compassion and understanding. From my understanding, he has some understanding regarding children with autism. As a chairman of DuPage, he should be using those type of skills to show empathy, compassion, and inclusion to Black Lives Matter, just how he had some of those skills for children with autism. He should also educate himself and his police department regarding these issues of over 400 years of discrimination, since so many Black people have died just because of the color of their skin. What has helped myself and others have so much more compassion regarding Black Lives Matter is learning about all the discrimination Black people continue to go through in the present day. Some recommendations to become aware how Blacks continue to be discriminated against is 13th documentary on Netflix, The Jane Elliott Experiment of Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes, or Tulsa 1921, which is about how whites burnt down Black Wall Street. There are also many books that can be read, such as The New Jim Crow, Stamped from the Beginning, etc. I am also going to write, there are some good police officers who are won for the right reasons, but there is also a code of silence that needs to end. I'm going to end with one of Jane Elliott's famous statements, quote, if you white folks want to be treated the way Blacks are in society, stand, unquote. She goes on to say, quote, nobody is standing here, unquote. Thank you very much for reading my concerns. Sincerely, Kelly Dunkel. The next one is from Kate Treadway from Lombard, Illinois. Subject, DeCiani. It needs to be brought to the board's attention that Pete DeCiani's actions at a rally on June 27, 2020 are deplorable, divisive, and unacceptable for an elected official or any decent human being. First, as the chair of the Health and Human Services, you should be wearing a mask at a public event. The governor of Illinois has mandated masks in public places where a 6-foot distance cannot be kept, and seeing as member DeCiani felt it necessary to scream within inches of people's faces, he should have been wearing a mask. He should most definitely be removed from this position immediately and be replaced with someone who follows science during a global pandemic. Second, the peaceful protesters that member DeCiani was screaming at were reading the names of black people who've been murdered by police officers. The fact that he was so violently against the reading of these names shows that he cares more about the police, who are heavily armed and protected, as well as having zero consequences for their violent actions, than he does about his black constituents. In fact, when one of these constituents emailed her concerns to him about his behavior, he told her to, quote, shove you, parentheses, sick, vote up your ass, unquote. This obviously unacceptable behavior for an elected official, and the board should censure this comment and this behavior, along with removing Pete DeCiani from public office immediately, as he is clearly not able to hear and take into consideration all of his constituents. The next comment is from Kristen Sterling of Lombard, Illinois. Subject, Pete DeCiani should be censured and resign. Comment reads, I just watched a video of Rep. Pete DeCiani angrily yelling in the face of counter-protesters during a Blue Lives Matter march. He was wearing no mask and came within inches of several of the protesters' faces. As an elected official of DuPage County, he should act with respect and civility to all constituents when participating in public-facing events. His aggressive and reckless behavior put others at risk of contracting the virus. Plus, he portrayed our community as unsympathetic to the current racial justice issues. I believe the board should issue a censure, and Rep. DeCiani should be asked to resign. Next comment is from Carrie Haley from Lombard. Subject, Mr. DeCiani's behavior. Mr. DeCiani's actions this past week have brought into serious question whether he has the judgment, character, and temperament necessary to represent a vibrant and diverse community like DuPage County. Telling a concerned citizen to, quote, stick your vote up your ass, end quote, and yelling directly in the faces of women and children, in parentheses, while unmasked, is not behavior that should be accepted or tolerated from our elected representatives. Telling someone he doesn't agree with to, quote, leave the community then, unquote, as Mr. DeCiani did in one video from the Back the Blue rally, is also unacceptable. As our elected representatives, you are charged to represent every one of your constituents, not just those who agree with you. If your constituents do not feel comfortable reaching out to you with issues and concerns for fear of an aggressive response, how can you possibly represent them effectively? For this reason, Member DeCiani should step down. The next comment from Catherine Nash from Lombard. Subject, public comment regarding racial bias training. Comment reads, I am pleased that you have invited the NAACP, Quad County Urban League, and DuPage African Methodist Episcopal Church to speak. I look forward to hearing their presentations. As you are hopefully aware, two recent incidents by two county board members raised questions about the board's efforts to improve diversity and inclusion. To recap, a few days ago, member Pete DeCiani replied to a constituent's concerns about his actions at a, quote, Blue Lives Matter, unquote, event with, quote, go stick your vote in your ass, unquote. The fact that member DeCiani attended, quote, Blue Lives Matter protest without a mask during a national health emergency and during a pandemic in which Black Americans are dying at the hands of police seems to indicate that he does not understand the Black American experience. Just a few weeks prior to this, member Steve Noonan liked a social media comment stating, quote, "Until a few rioters are shoot dead and their bodies left in the street for the wolves, there's no message that law-abiding people and the officers that protect them can send to these terrorists to instill fear and good behavior in them," end quote. This was in response to Black Lives Matter protests and supposed looting, which is a false narrative anyway, since all the Black Lives Matter protests in our area have been peaceful, with looters having nothing to do with the protests. I hope this committee can understand why I am concerned with the DuPage County Board's ability and willingness to represent fairly and without discrimination all residents of DuPage County. DuPage County is not very diverse, with a 66% white population. As part of that demographic, I am using my voice and my white privilege to ask this committee to take steps to better understand what it is like to live as a minority in our country. Black Americans are not safe. They haven't been safe in this country since its founding, and it is the responsibility of every one of us to help right this grave injustice. I have two simple asks for this committee. One, commit to taking the American Bar Association's 21-day racial equity habit building challenge that requires just a 30-minute daily commitment to learn more about the Black American experience. The goal is a deeper understanding of the intersections of race, power, privilege, and oppression, and to develop more compassion in the quest for racial equality. It is my understanding that the county board has so far declined to participate in any sort of racial bias training. I fully support formal racial bias training, but since the board has declined, I encourage you to take part in this simple challenge. 2, support Member Chaplin's effort to make Juneteenth a public holiday. It's far past time that we honor the contributions of Black Americans to our democracy and better educate ourselves about their continued fight for racial justice. Juneteenth is a very small step in that direction and supports this board's strategic plan for diversity and inclusion. It is your responsibility as elected representatives to listen to the people in your communities, asking that you take their concerns seriously. Use the power granted to you by your elected position to set a good example. Of course, education, words, and committees are not nearly enough, not for those suffering discrimination and violence. We have to do more at every level to ensure our most vulnerable neighbors in DuPage County are safe. Thank you for your consideration. The next comment is from Carrie Kincannon of Elmhurst, Illinois. Subject, Pete DeCiani. I am a lifelong Elmhurst resident, and I'm appalled by board member DeCiani's behavior at recent peaceful protests in our town. A former mayor and board member in charge of health and human services is not only setting a horrible example for our community by not wearing a mask as recommended by the CDC, but I've certainly seen people face legal consequences across the country after being caught on video for endangering others' lives by shouting into people's faces without wearing a mask. Not exactly sure what makes him special in this case, but if I were that protester, I'd press charges. Our leaders are elected and appointed to work in the best interest of our community, and that behavior goes against every single thing we entrust them to be and do. What a disappointment. The next comment is from Clara Lewis from Elmhurst. Subject is, whose responsibility is ensuring a complete count? Comment reads, thank you to the Complete Count Committee for working to ensure an accurate 2020 census for DuPage County residents. Ensuring an accurate 2020 census count is critical to creating an anti-racist, equitable, and just community. The integrity of our democratic processes, such as the census, has been under attack and politicized by professional gerrymanderers who have attempted to manipulate the census to be, in their own words, quote, advantageous to Republicans and non-Hispanic whites, end quote. This information is sourced from commoncause.org and the New York Times. It must be emphasized that anti-racism, inclusion, and diversity are not the sole responsibility of one DuPage County Board committee. Creating an anti-racist and equitable community is the responsibility of all DuPage County residents, institutions, and should be especially be demonstrated by the DuPage County board members, led by Chairman Dan Cronin. I call on the county board chairman and all board members to commit to tangible, long-term actions to eliminate racist and harmful policing and continuously educate themselves about how to be anti-racist. Next comment is from Sarah Campagna from Lombard. Subject, Paul DiCiani. I am deeply disturbed by 3 videos and an email exchange involving Paul DiCiani that I viewed on June 27th and would like to make you all aware as well. Mr. DiCiani attended a, quote, back the blue, end quote, event outside of the Elmhurst Police Department where there were other residents who had assembled, in parentheses, peacefully, to read the names of Black lives who have been lost at the hands of police in the recent past. He could be seen aggressively getting in the faces of people, screaming and doing all of this without a mask. At least in the video, he appears to be about the only person not wearing a mask, which is even more disturbing considering he is the chair of the Health and Human Services. This is in itself is enough to warrant a complaint. However, when a member of the community who also happens to be a woman of color emailed him to express her feelings about his actions, his response was simply, quote, shove you, in parentheses, his typo, not mine. Vote up your ass. I stood up for my cops today, Pete, end quote. This would be a completely unprofessional and highly aggressive response for a normal citizen. However, for an elected official to act this way is utterly wrong. The Elmhurst police are not, quote, his cops, end quote. They work for all of us, including those who were in the peaceful protest, including the member of the community who submitted an email complaint to Mr. DiCiani and every other citizen in the area. Next submission is from Gabriel Lewis from Elmhurst. The subject, racial equity initiatives. Thank you to the Complete Count Committee for working to ensure an accurate census count in DuPage County. This type of work is important in creating an equitable community. I would both like to express my great disappointment in the actions, in parentheses, or lack thereof, of various DuPage County board members regarding racial justice. As I hope you all know, board members Pete DiCiani and Sean Noonan have recently and appallingly expressed their non-commitment to fighting for racial justice and have even exposed their own racist and white supremacist values. I am disappointed in the county board, which represents me and so many other minoritized people. If Pete DiCiani and Sean Noonan are the kinds of people who are, quote, leading, end quote, DuPage County, then Chairman Cronin should take a long look in the mirror. At the very least, DiCiani and Noonan must resign or be removed from all positions of authority they hold. Lastly, I would like the board to immediately begin discussing ways to implement anti-racist education through the DuPage County government and schools. This is imperative. There is no time left to wait. Anti-racist educating must be happening everywhere, especially in government and all public schools. Thank you for your time. Final submission from M. Bennett. Subject, Peter DiCiani. Dear committee members, I am writing to express extreme dismay over the actions of one of the board members, Peter DiCiani, at a recent rally. While he is certainly entitled to protest and express his opinions, the vitriol, intimidation, and complete disregard for public health he displayed is not appropriate for a public official. At the very least, he should be removed as chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, as his actions endangered the health of our citizens in general and the specific individuals he violated. Given the inappropriate nature of his actions, however, I believe his resignation from the board is also appropriate. Thank you for your consideration. That concludes the public comment.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, we will be getting to that. Just some conclusory remarks. All right. I want to thank our speakers again and all our Complete Count committee members and our participants for participating in this important dialogue. And we cannot, as elected officials, be passive. As the chair of strategic planning, we monitor progress of all the departments in regards to compliance with our county's core imperatives. And we'll continue to work in this regard. But it will take more. I want to emphasize that it will take more than strategic planning committee, doing what we do. It will take more than mere workshops or mere dialogue. It will take a lot more. And it will take actual plans and implementation of solutions continuously to see change. We cannot stop working. This is a continuous thing. We cannot stop working. So I want to thank you, everybody, and I move to adjourn this meeting. All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.